final and biggest game of the weekend is Liverpool against Man City, which is a 4 p.m. kickoff on Sunday. So it's first versus second in the league. Man City obviously sit 8 points off their rivals, but Liverpool were able to extend that gap by beating Southampton at St Mary's on the weekend. It wasn't quite the sort of regulation victory that most would have expected or anticipated, but Salah was the standout performer in that game. He scored 2 goals, hit the post late on, and he just looked generally really fired up for the game. Midweek, he was less impressive. He obviously missed a penalty, but he won't care because Liverpool were dominant once again, registering a 2-0 win against Real Madrid, going for quite a strong side. That game was quite a high intensity game. It was very end to end, a lot of running. Just wonder whether that would have any impact on Liverpool this weekend. Pep Guardiola, however, is into sort of unexplored territory, uncharted territory, with a horrible run of form. 5 straight losses, followed by the draw to Feyenoord at home. But that game was more than just a draw. City were obviously 3-0 up after 74 minutes. So to draw 3-3 is pretty incredible. Actually, it's kind of unheard of for a Guardiola side to capitulate like that. So it's been more than just a poor run of form. It's been a disastrous period for them, really, and we're into sort of something that we haven't experienced yet. And because of that, I wouldn't be surprised to see radical changes from Guardiola. I just think it's a really tough game to predict, especially if Guardiola is to make big changes. In terms of the injury report, Trent is obviously back in training and was on the bench against Madrid, which is important because he will likely start this game with Bradley taken off towards the end of that Madrid game with an apparent hamstring injury. Tsimikas is also out, which should work to benefit Robertson, should increase his expected minutes. Alisson and Jota are still out, but Konate is a potential big one because he was injured in what was the last play of the game against Madrid, and he is set to be assessed ahead of this one. So if he does miss, that would be big news, but would likely give Kwanzaa an opportunity in a big game. For Man City, De Bruyne is still yet to start since returning from his injury. Other than that, they haven't really got anyone else out. It's just players returning. But I don't really want to give a team sheet prediction for City. I just think we could get some changes, some quite big changes. But that is just something to keep an eye on, sort of as more information is released. So I think with this game, there's lots of potential angles. And I will be confirming them sort of closer to the kickoff time, which I'll have a thread going out doing that. So again, if you're not following me on Twitter, make sure you are, just to stay in the loop with all the bets that I post. Bernardo fouls increasing massively. Yeah, the cards too. Yeah, so I'm actually going to cover Bernardo Silva in this game, so I'll come back to that comment in a second. The first potential angle I have for this game is for Haaland to register 2 or more shots. Obviously something familiar over the last couple of weeks. I'm not actually as set on it this time as I usually am. I'm probably leaning towards more ignoring it actually, just based on how effectively Liverpool dealt with Mbappe. He had absolutely nothing to go off, and I think that's more credit to Liverpool than sort of Mbappe had a stinker. Obviously he missed a penalty, but from open play, just had absolutely nothing in that game. However, obviously as I mentioned, Konate might miss this game, which is another big variable to consider, because I think if Haaland can sort of stick with Kwanzaa, he has a lot better chance of sort of increasing his attacking output than if he is against Konate. So again, one to keep an eye on. But Haaland is plus money for 2 or more shots on target, which is so rare. Next bet I have is, I quite like this one actually, it's for McAllister to have 1 or more shots. I think there's potential to ladder this one actually. He's top price with Bet365 and Unibet at 1.72. He's averaging 1.03 shots per 90 under Arnie's slot, so obviously nothing particularly revolutionary there in the data. But that rises to 1.28 when playing at Anfield. And he's landed this bet in 6 out of 8 starts this season. And we generally tend to see an uptick in more difficult games. So we had 2 most recently against Madrid. He had 2 against Leverkusen in Champions League. And he was memorably fantastic in this head-to-head last season against City. He had 4 shots in that game. He scored, but it was from the penalty spot. So I doubt he sort of takes another penalty if they are to be awarded one with Salah available. Although it's worth noting that Salah did obviously miss against Madrid. But as I say, 4 shots in that game, 3 from open play. He was always available at the edge of the box. And that becomes important in this game where sort of clear-cut chances are likely to be more scarce. So 1.72 for him to have at least one shot, I think is a pretty nice price. Next one will be the one Ben Gray mentioned. It will be for Bernardo Silva, fouls and tackles. He generally is just a player to target against Liverpool. Doesn't seem to have much respect for them, and that's reflected in his foul counts and his tackle counts. So last season, Bernardo Silva had 2 fouls in respective games against Liverpool, and he was booked in both. Across his career, he's made a foul in 8 out of 10 against the Reds, averaging 1.38 fouls per 90, which is quite a significant uptick on his averages in general. He's priced at 1.61 with Bet365 to commit 1 foul or more, which I think looks massive just based on that. But I think the real value actually for this is, or slightly better value, is in his tackle markets. So he obviously is right at the top for tackles in this head-to-head. He's made at least 2 tackles in 9 out of 10 head-to-head games against Liverpool. And he's priced at 2.1 to repeat that. So that looks pretty big on the surface, especially considering that it landed in both head-to-head games last season, which he started, and he had 2 fouls in those, and he was booked, which obviously would hinder his tackle chances. So I do think he is a player to target. I would say the tackle line is probably slightly better value than his foul line. But as you say, he does generally see an uptick in bigger games, especially against Liverpool. So there is a lot of potential for both. It's always difficult to choose between one or the other, because you think if he is to get an early card, that would sort of massively affect his tackle chances. So that is something again to consider. But I am at the moment leaning towards tackles as opposed to fouls. The next person that stands out is obviously slightly below Bernardo Silva, Rodri. His tackle numbers are also notable in this fixture, averaging 2.56 per 90. Obviously, he won't play, but who do we think will start in that same sort of defensive midfield role? Against Sporting, it was Mateus Nunes, and in that game he made 5 tackles and 2 fouls, 11 ground duels, which is notably high. And I think if he is to start in a similar role, 1.72 for 2 or more tackles looks a real good shout. He played the full 90 against Sporting, and he generally just has seen a bit more responsibility recently for Pep Guardiola in this sort of bad run of form. But yeah, I think defensive midfielder against Liverpool should see plenty of defensive work. I'm not sure what Paddy have his foul price at, but he's generally been opening around even money by 1.9, so that could be one to keep an eye on as well. And finally, my target player will be Kyle Walker, who was really kept on his toes last time in this matchup against Liverpool, as he made 3 tackles and 2 fouls against Luis Diaz. He was also dribbled past 3 times, so heavily involved in that game. And I think Arne Slot will sort of look to target that matchup. I think Walker obviously has ridiculous recovery pace, but he's not the most adept player defensively. And I think Arne Slot will recognise that and look to target him. He's priced at 1.61 to make 2 or more tackles with Sky. Obviously a bit on the short side, but I just think the matchup is really good, and could pair that with something, for example, a Luis Diaz foul, Luis Diaz to draw a foul, something along those lines. But that is 4 potential early angles for the biggest match of the weekend, and that will conclude all the games covered for this stream. Thank you for your support. Thank you for leaving your comments. And thank you for your interactions. Remember to stay tuned on Twitter. Remember to stay tuned on Telegram. All my bets will be posted on Telegram. I made a slight